me that the severity is kind of...
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Prab Hu. I'm the Sustainability Manager at the Sasin Center for Sustainability Management, and also the President of the Net Impact Bangkok Professional Chapter. We have our Net Impact Bangkok Professional Chapter monthly luncheon meeting every third Thursday of the month. So next month will be June 19th. And we also have a monthly trip to an interesting place that is sustainability related. And this month on the 24th, which is a Saturday, we have a trip to the Hansa Hotel, right in the middle of Bangkok. It's an eco-luxury boutique hotel. It's very interesting in terms of energy efficiency and the design, and also their people and their impact on the environment. And I'd like to give you a few more items after Kun Michael's talk, but first I'd like to introduce Kun Michael Poonpipat, the Business Development Director of Veolia Water, which is a cutting-edge sustainable environmental solutions company in wastewater treatment. And he's here today to give us an introduction to the true cost of the world's most scarce resource, water. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming him.
Thank you for that introduction. That was very, very nice. Well, I'm the Sasin alumni, and it feels really good to come back to Sasin and contribute, especially with something that I'm so passionate about. As Kubrea mentioned, that I work for Veolia. Maybe some of you are familiar, some of you are not familiar with Veolia. Veolia is an environmental company, founded in 1848 in France. So basically, they're doing environmental, not just water, but environmental waste management. They also have power plants, but I'll get into that a little later. But I wanted to talk about the true cost of water, and this is not necessarily something that I made up. This is a global initiative that Veolia had came up with. Basically, this net impact is the perfect platform, actually, for this. And I'd really like to give thanks to Net Impact for having me speak. Just a little overview so you understand. I won't get too long in Veolia, but I wanted to explain why am I here, why am I relevant, and why am I speaking about this, and how does Veolia really integrate with the environment. Veolia is an environmental company. As you can see, the revenues are quite big, 29.4 billion. So when people talk about environment and making money from the environment, Veolia, I think, is a good case study to show a successful company. It's listed in the stock exchange in New York. And within the company, there's basically 3 divisions. Okay, I'll use the mouse. There's water, which is one of our biggest divisions within Veolia. There's also energy services, which is basically power plants, and also waste management. Veolia is not doing waste management in Thailand. Veolia is doing waste management in I guess, other countries like Australia and France, and Thailand, I think, is a bit too difficult to do waste management yet. But within the water group, I fall under this smaller group called Solutions and Technologies. And Veolia Solutions and Technologies, basically, we are bringing wastewater treatment equipment, wastewater treatment, but I should say solutions. We bring wastewater treatment solutions and also processed water solutions. I think maybe some of us aren't always cognizant that there's a lot of water treatment that goes into the water that we drink, the water that we use at our house, So I'm basically, within Veolia, there's basically municipal and industrial. I'm in the industrial part of it, and basically providing solutions to those industrial factories that are in the industrial estates. Just real quickly, Veolia's within this solutions and technologies department, there's quite a few employees, 11,000, mostly in Europe, France, which is also in Europe, but this is not double counting, South America, Africa, and actually in Asia as well. As I mentioned, we're divided into industrial and municipal. Within the industrial, there's also a design build, which is me. I do big projects, I do new projects for companies. And there's also solutions whereby we're selling equipment, we're selling like membranes and chemicals. And then we also do operations, like operations and maintenance. So Veolia in Thailand is actually, they got lucky somehow, and they landed a very big concession for every government industrial estate in Thailand called GASCO, which is a collaboration of a local company, Veolia, and the IEAT, Industrial Estate Authority of Thailand. So you can see within Asia, we're all over Asia. I'm looking after Thailand and Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos. There's an office in Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Taiwan, Philippines, Japan, and China. This is the last slide on Veolia, sorry. Just so you understand, I'm basically providing solutions for oil and gas, upstream and downstream, which means offshore and onshore, food and beverage, power industry. You can see all of these industries are very water intensive. Pulp and paper, Thailand is very big, Thailand and Indonesia are very big in pulp and paper. Pharmaceutical, microelectronics, this is more Singapore. And this is more Indonesia, palm oil and automotive, which Thailand is big in automotive, but mostly Japanese, so Japanese tend to use Japanese company, except for Michelin, which is Michelin is a French company. So, get my notes. So you can start a bit about the true cost of water. So why is Veolia promoting the true cost of water? Once again, our core business is to provide solutions and outsource expertise for water and wastewater management. We know that globally there's a big range of solutions that already exist to tackle some of the main challenges. This footprint is basically carbon footprint. I think some of you are familiar with carbon footprint. This one is water footprint. We use water footprint quite a bit, showing how much water you use, how much water you discharge. There's also resource footprint. There's also ecosystem footprint. So you can see that there's a lot of footprints. And actually today there's a lot of solutions to tackle the challenges to manage these footprints, both on the municipality level as well as at the industrial level. The challenge that I face a lot of times, and I'm sure some of you in this room will also agree that really the challenge is to demonstrate the real payback. The real payback on monetizing off of these challenges, these footprint challenges, to break even of an investment and to demonstrate, economically speaking, is it worth it to invest in these challenges? And I have to admit, I've met with many business decision makers, and I can tell you that the only metric that is really important is this green metric, and that is the financial metric, the financial footprint, the money footprint. People really want to know when am I going to get paid back? I mean, if I invest in all of these environmental solutions, is it just CSR? Is it just me looking good? But really, there needs to be a way to monetize off of these investments. So when I say green metric, it really means green dollars. If I'm not able to demonstrate the economical benefits of investing, going into sustainable progress, and really to be able to quantify and to not just limit ourselves to a CSR report or a pilot project. The only way to really secure this is to monetize, to put a price on the externalities and demonstrate once again the true payback, in particular the water parameter. As you can see, the World Economic Forum had actually listed the risks that we'd be facing according to the most impact and the least impact. And the top 5 are major systemic financial failure. I think living in Thailand, we're all familiar with financial failure for the economy and the impact that that has. Also in Thailand, we're very familiar with water supply crisis. About 7 years ago, there was a drought. About 2 to 3 years ago, there was a flood. I think it impacted quite a few people, not just on the business level, but on a livelihood level. And in addition, chronic fiscal imbalances, weapons of mass destruction, failure of climate change. These are all real big risks, and I mean, I was a bit surprised to see that the water supply crisis is very, very high up on this list. So this slide is basically looking at where growth is, where business growth is not always where the best water management is. So you can see in the U.S., this is where the growth is over in China. Growth is in India. These are all areas that have, I would say, some challenging water, difficulties with water, some scarcities with water. Basically, this slide kind of sums it up. It shows that by 2050, which is a long time from now, 70% of the of where growth is also where there's going to be water problems. So 70% of the GDP will be produced in water scarce area. This will, if business continues as usual. So I just wanted to basically touch on a few of the, so when I say blue risks are water risks. And these are a few examples of where water risks are already happening. In Spain, there was a drought very recently. In Spain, it was a 60-year drought, and they didn't have enough water, and they actually had to import water from France by boat, whereby the water was costing upwards of, in Thai baht, 1,000 Thai baht per cubic meter. So for people who aren't familiar with how much water costs, in Thailand, in an industrial state, they will charge you about 15 baht. 15 baht per cubic meter. So you can imagine that the price of water for these people in Spain was a big game changer. In Vietnam, I'm not really sure what this example was, but I'd like to talk about an example in Thailand that I actually faced with a water crisis, which was, I was providing a water treatment solution for a seafood processing plant, and they were very happy with doing the latest technology, recycling, using the biogas, everything I had pitched them they were up for, but they had a problem with water, which was their seafood, which was in the seafood farm. For this example, was shrimp farm. I don't know if you're familiar or not, but Thailand has a crisis for shrimp disease. So this shrimp disease is called EMS, early mortality syndrome. Shrimps don't grow over a certain size, and basically the issue was that most of the shrimp in Thailand is exported. It's exported to the US, it's exported to Europe, and there was a ban on Thai shrimp. shrimp coming from Thailand was banned all last year. So maybe that's why you saw maybe more shrimp here in Thailand available. But I mean, it really impacted my potential client to the point where they had to postpone because there was just no more shrimp and there was no more demand for shrimp from Thailand. And but on the other hand, there was also a benefit whereby I could provide them this aquaculture sustainable shrimp farm. So they're still trying to figure out whether or not they want to invest in that. But I mean, the key message here is these water or blue risks are really affecting the bottom lines of big companies that I'm sure we're all familiar with. In Australia, Australia is very huge for mining. They had unusual flooding, and they had $2.3 billion lost in their mining industry. In Chile, I think that there was also one of the mining companies had lost their license to operate due to bad environmental practices. There was actually some boycott as well of some of the precious metals that they were excavating and selling on market. There was also in the U.S. boycotts on unsustainable fish farming in Alaska. So, I mean, I don't have to get too much into these. I think that everybody's very familiar with, you know, these water crises and how they affect the bottom line. So we're all very familiar with risks. We see that there's operational risks. We see that there's financial risks. We see that there's regulatory risks. We see that there's reputational risks. With this reputation one, this was in India, whereby Coca-Cola, I shouldn't say the name, but I think it's quite well known. In Coca-Cola, there was the farmers were really upset with with their usage of the water, whereby the farmers didn't have water to use. About 6 years ago in Thailand, we had a similar instance with Mataput, Rayong. They were using a lot of the water. The farmers didn't have the water, fighting over water. And who will win? These people will win. In the end, they will win. So, you know, at the same time, I can literally think of off the top of my head 20 examples in Thailand with you know, coal-fired power plants. Very difficult to get a power purchasing agreement because of the discharge, the waste, the zero liquid discharge regulations. Also, I mean, even recently, with the saltwater intrusion into the supply for Bangkok water, that's also another very good example. So quickly, I will just put on the video, and then I think the video will help people visualize.
Economic Forum's latest Global Risks Report, water crises will be the second major global risk for business over the next 10 years. Population growth and continued economic development, together with climate change, will make existing water challenges even tougher. In the face of these challenges, decision makers need a pragmatic metric to help them make long-term business decisions that integrate the sustainability issues associated with water use and monetary value. In other terms, we need to monetize the blue risks to better price water. Developed by Veolia, the true cost of water is a game-changing methodology that focuses on the financial implications of water-related risks for public authorities and industrial companies. It maps these risks in terms of likelihood and potential economic impact, taking into account direct water costs, indirect water costs, and the financial implications of the water risks. The true cost of water can be applied to evaluate the financial opportunities behind new water management strategies, or the implementation of advanced and integrated water solutions. With the true cost of water, companies can better manage blue risks and externalities, optimise costs associated with water management, enhance competitiveness, secure their social licence to operate, and ensure long-term profitability. The true cost of water, a new decision-making tool for sustainable water management and co-creation of shared value.
Okay, so that was a nice video.
Water lies.
You don't have to watch it once. Okay, so basically this is really the heart of the true cost of water. Basically what we've done, we've mapped out the likelihood. So the likelihood of these water challenges, these water crises, and the impact according to dollars over cubic meter. And we've plotted out, I guess these are the industries. Every industry has a different likelihood, and every industry is impacted differently. First, we want to look at what are your direct costs. So for water, direct costs, one would be buying water, buying raw resources of water, and then also investing into the equipment, the machinery involved, and Borden shaking his head because he's from the water industry. But and also, you know, is operating costs. Operating costs are huge. Actually, operating costs are sometimes more than the capital expenditures, so we call them capex and opex. So traditionally, people use capex and opex to really see whether it's worth to invest. And sometimes, I guess sometimes Veolia has high capex, so we want to explain to them really by investing and really understanding how to monetize that equipment to reduce the effects of high operating costs by recycling water, by using the biogas to make the energy to be reused in the plant. So first is the direct cost, people are familiar with. I wanted to just briefly show a little comic about indirect costs. There's two babies here. One baby says, when I grow up, I want to be an environmental activist. And then the second baby says, well, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to be a mining developer. And you can see that they're both happy babies, that they know what they want to be. And then there's a third baby that says, those two alone should ensure I become a wealthy lawyer. Because basically what happens is, whenever you have these water crises, the people that end up really gaining are the lawyers. No offense to lawyers, but they can sleep easy knowing that they will be making their money one way or the other. So what I'm trying to say is, let's try to proactively identify some of these indirect costs to avoid paying this little sleepy lazy baby who wants to be a lawyer. So we have here some indirect costs. I think that a lot of us are familiar with these indirect costs. Some of these people, some of the CFOs, they're familiar with these indirect costs because they can quantify these indirect costs, and some of these are the cost of capital. Coming from Sasin, I think everybody knows what cost of capital is, so I don't have to explain that. CSR, there's CSR management. Sometimes there's what I also learned in Sasin was crisis management. There's also some contingency for that. Some legal, some public affairs. These again are indirect costs that people are familiar with, but what people aren't always familiar with are some of these blue risks, which when you graph it out, actually can be more costly than the actual costs that you had thought were part of your costs, which were direct costs, indirect costs. This example, this is just a random example, but it's a real example. It's a real random example, and I'm not going to say the name, but we see here that actually their financial has been impacted more than the cost that they had anticipated. So basically, this is something that we really need to be cognizant of. So from this, sometimes you get reduced allocation, remediation. Say if you have like some pollution. Say for example, a perfect example would be maybe the Exxon Valdez, when they had the oil spill, or the other oil spill with BP in the Gulf of Mexico. There's huge remediation costs that sometimes need to be looked at according to your industry. In addition, water shortages. I can name a few more. In Thailand alone, some of these industrial factories that are along Chao Phraya, there's potentially going to be a new mandate that says that those factories have to follow a zero liquid discharge. Zero liquid discharge means after the wastewater has been treated, they are no longer allowed to discharge any water. So that means, what do they do with the water? They have to recycle it, they have to reuse it, they have to use it in their cooling tower, they have to use it in their boiler. So they basically concentrate their stream, and then they have to evaporate it. You have to use evaporation, which is very expensive, to evaporate their very concentrated wastewater, and then until it's a dry waste. In Thailand, this is not necessarily something that is being enforced yet, but the Queen of Thailand had came up with the idea that she wants to clean up the Chao Phraya River, and that means zero liquid discharge for zoning for factories along the Chao Phraya River. Good for me, because I sell that. But bad for bad for factories. We're talking about a huge change in how much their cost is going to be.
I'm sure the factory owner would be concerned about that. If I'm a factory owner and I'm building a factory right now, and I go to the water board, this Department of Industrial Works, how worried should I be?
You should be worried about that, and that's why a lot of these big factories that are coming to Thailand, they typically want to go to industrial estate, because the industrial estate will more or less handle that for them. The industrial estate has a common facility for wastewater treatment. There hasn't been a regulation yet for zero liquid discharge on industrial estates yet, but one of the examples is one project that I'm very close to closing is a well-known household food and beverage product. It's like a drink mix, and they had invested large amounts of money in Thailand some 40-some years ago, and they have a big plant, well situated, but unfortunately, I think when they came, at that time there was probably nothing, but they were along the river. Now with the growth of the BTS and population expansion, that whole area around that factory is all community, and they're actually they want to keep a good name. They don't want to disrupt their reputation, so they're actually thinking about going zero liquid discharge, and they wanted to understand what are those costs of being zero liquid discharge, because they can't move the plant. Maybe they can make another plant, but they want to save that money for expansion in Myanmar and Cambodia and that. So they want to use what they have, but they really need to understand what are those costs involved with that. So yeah, if you're a plant and you're thinking about dumping into Chao Phraya River, even treated wastewater, you might want to rethink that, because being in an industrial state, sometimes you have more higher costs of raw water, but sometimes you can be a bit shielded by these governmental risks. So this slide basically is the true cost of water, whereby these are industries, whether they be textile, power plants, microelectronics, chemical, they all have their different livelihoods. And what Veolia has done is, Veolia has came up with, looked at its overall global experience, which is quite massive, and they mapped out these risks. And it's not a definitive, finite number where you have to go by that number, but it's more, you better be aware of these risks because they could affect you. Let's see, could affect you. Say for example, one company who had forecasted their business margin, their profitability. They said, okay, they had some up and down years, but after 2015 they wanted to really increase their margins over time, all the way to 2025. But what we basically wanted them to know was that there are risks associated, and you have to really look at the true cost of water and how to mitigate these costs so your real margin is not impacted this way. So this is, I guess, could be a very scary thing for a CFO to say, wow, so we need to come up with all this money just to make sure that we mitigate our water risks. And in a way, it's something that you should be aware of, because now now I'm talking to, the other day I had gotten an email from a company, and they were this shrimp crisis, and I had been trying to pitch my aquaculture. Veolia has aquaculture systems for like salmon, for shrimp, and all this. I was always trying to pitch that to them previously, but they were saying, oh, we do it in Thailand, we do it different, we do the shrimp in the ground, in the pond, and that works fine. And then when the EMS happened, you know, they said, okay, that plant is not going to be happening anymore. And then finally what happened was the budget for the next year came out, and their forecast was completely missed. They needed to figure out some way to manage that EMS, and then they called me in for a meeting. Typically I meet with the engineers. I meet with the engineers. I'm not meeting with any, you know, I guess Sasin type people. I'm meeting with factory manager. Very difficult to explain this to. But this meeting was actually, I was called into the board meeting. And it was the board meeting, it was the CEO, the CFO, and everybody. And I had no heads up. I just I came in, and then luckily, you know, for Veolia, they prepared me with a lot of marketing material, and I was able to present, and hopefully that they will be doing something, and if they do something, I will definitely invite Net Impact to visit their shrimp farm, because potentially it would be, I guess, the first in Southeast Asia, besides a pilot plant in Vietnam. So, looking at the margins, just a quick breakdown, I wanted to wrap this up. You see that there's gross margin here. Everybody goes, wow, big gross margin. There's also costs for distribution, for freight, for resources, for water, for energy, for labor. This is what they had expected, but what happened was, with the true cost of water, we looked to see that actually their water costs were a bit higher, and then their margins were a bit lower. So what does that mean? So that means that they have to take these into consideration. They have to figure out a way to mitigate these risks. So I'm not trying to come here to scare you and hey, you better do your balance sheet different. I'm here to tell you that these risks, there's a way to monetize off these risks. There's these ways to mitigate these risks. And the key takeaway is that you have to really capture the opportunity of these risks. And maybe I'll skip the slide just to save time. I realize it's lunchtime, and this slide is not as important as this slide. Basically, traditionally for wastewater treatment plants, so you have a production, so you're making a chemical. Say you're making a chemical, and then your chemical, you have wastewater, and you have your wastewater treatment plant. So wastewater goes into your wastewater treatment plant. The wastewater treatment plant treats your wastewater to make it what we call effluent, water good enough to discharge. So not good enough to drink, not really good enough to take a shower with, but good enough to discharge. And those are your limits, your discharge limits. From that, you also have sludge. Sludge is the byproduct that you eventually just send to a landfill. And then you use chemicals, you use polymers, you use chemicals to treat that wastewater. And you also use a large amount of electricity. Electricity is one of the big things that goes into the considerations for a water treatment plant. People want to reduce their water footprint, use electricity, use less chemicals, because at the end of the day, the wastewater treatment plant is basically an additional cost that nobody really wants to pay for, but they have to. And what I'm saying is there is a solution, and there are solutions, there are technologies. I can provide those technologies whereby, say we're taking their waste, we're using their waste, we're recycling the water. So here this should be a two-way arrow whereby we're treating their waste, we're making water that should be recycled back into their refinery, and basically that water reduces their water consumption. With that sludge, typically you can also make to fertilizer. You can also make, Veolia has a patented product, not yet in Thailand, but maybe soon, whereby we're taking wastewater, municipal wastewater, and we're making bioplastics. So we're making bioplastics from wastewater. I've seen it before. It looks kind of like an iPhone cover, that kind of a plastic from wastewater. So you're taking something from nothing. You're taking something from waste and making it a valuable resource, renewable resource. Within Veolia, there's another company that's more or less has these evaporation. For when companies are forced to do zero liquid discharge, they have to evaporate. And what I've seen in Veolia is actually there's another business model whereby sometimes in these chemical plants, when you evaporate and you get a dry waste, that dry waste is sometimes actually very valuable. And especially with the mining community in Vietnam. You know, some of these companies, they're not household names. I've never really heard of these companies, but they're huge. They're huge money-making companies. They produce chemicals, they have a waste, they evaporate their waste, and then they sell their byproduct. And they almost just package it right out of this evaporator. So typically, nowadays, when customers come to me, I don't like to just try to sell them something. I like to provide to them a solution. And that's typically reusing their water, when we go into anaerobic, when we treat their wastewater with anaerobic digesters, there's a production of biogas that's made. Biogas can be used for creating electricity, and that electricity goes back into the plant, or it can be used to burn in their boilers. So really, this is the key, is to really kind of identify ways to reduce those blue risks, reduce the true cost of water by having a sustainable industrial plant, or even a sustainable community. I'm not from the municipal part of the Veolia, but the municipal part of Veolia, they have tons of solutions also for governments, for airports. They use a lot of water. For schools, they use a lot of water. But also, basically understanding that there are technologies out there. I'm not the only one who sells these technologies. In Thailand, a lot of companies are able to do that. In Japan, I mean, it's almost commonplace as well. So just basically, quickly to highlight, I know these names mean nothing to you, but these are some Veolia products that we have. And before I used to work for a Thai company, and I really liked that Thai company, and we did like a BOO wastewater recycling company that was just, for me, it was really good to be part of. But at the end of the day, we only had one technology, which was reverse osmosis. We would use reverse osmosis to treat the wastewater and to sell it back to the factory. And we would go into a long-term BOO contract, 10 years for that. That was good, but coming to some company like Veolia, they're really integrating the latest technologies from Europe, from America, and they're bringing them to Thailand, they're bringing them to Myanmar, bringing them to Vietnam. And that's the whole concept of Veolia, is integrating those cutting-edge technologies to these parts of the world, and that's what they're banking on. And I encourage anybody who's interested at all to talk to me. We can exchange contact details. I would be more than happy to talk to you about how Veolia can help reduce your costs and to increase your product.
I think they have some questions.
And profitability.
Yes.
Okay, questions?
Yes, questions.
Questions.
Yes.
Two questions. I can shout.
It's Bill Marinelli from the Wastewater Bangkok. Two questions. By biogases, do you mean methane?
Yeah, methane.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second question, out of curiosity, why was Thai shrimp banned?
Basically, that disease was why was Thai shrimp banned? That disease, EMS, was other shrimp could get it. So if a shrimp that was imported from Thailand infected other shrimp population in another country, that shrimp, it's like even the Philippines, they had banned Thai shrimp because they don't want Thai shrimp coming into the Philippines. So America and Europe being strict, they saw this crisis and they saw these, obviously the shrimp had a disease, it was a disease, and it's a disease that comes every year. And they basically said, we don't need a crisis on our hands whereby people are eating diseased shrimp and somehow it being translated into people and people dying. So I have another presentation on the whole thing, but basically
And cow disease, essentially.
Yeah, that's right. So basically the idea of it was, in Thailand, in these areas, the way that they grow the shrimp is they call it flow through, where the water flows through the shrimp farm, and then the water flows out the shrimp farm. So these shrimps were like eating things that they naturally were not supposed to be eating or being exposed to. So what Veolia is proposing is what they call recirculating aquaculture system, whereby it's a closed system, and the closed system, the water is being treated and the water is being reintroduced, and that's more sustainable because then you have a perfect environment for the shrimps. Okay, so then how does that financially make sense to a company that's making shrimp? We had showed with a pilot plant in Vietnam that with this closed system, shrimp were not only more happy, but they were bigger. So you had bigger shrimp, you had healthier shrimp, fresher shrimp, shrimp that were tastier, and we had done the cost-benefit analysis, and we had proved that this investment was viable, and the break-even was something like 2 or 3 years. We did have to scale down the technology The technology was coming from Norway, which is we're part of Veolia, was doing Norway with the salmon and those fish farms. We did a hybrid kind of a hybrid, more affordable product for outdoors, whereas the fish farms in Europe are indoors.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Two more questions? Can you go back to the slide for the cost?
Okay. Not this one, the other one. Let's just set it up. Okay, hold on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you taken into, this is obviously from the perspective of the company, have you also taken into consideration the cost for the environment, for us as a society? Because I think that is minuscule to what we would have to pay. I think I wasn't sure which organization from, was it about IMF or so, how much does it cost to pay for all the bad things we do to the environment?
Yeah.
And that's even more scary because that's billions of US dollars per annum. So their point was, if we don't start do something today, in 10 years, it might be even double the price. And we can't avoid that because I think the report came out yesterday that there's more, the sea level is rising now for sure, and the Antarctic is having more meltdown. So I think that is even a small percentage of what if we take a big picture. So my question is, do you also take into consideration the big picture?
I think we take into consideration the cost, everything that we're able to tangibly able to calculate costs. Sometimes that means loss of sales, but then that again relates to the organization. I guess it's hard to quantify sometimes the actual costs.
I think it's difficult for a company, but for an institution it should be easy.
Yeah, I mean, I would be interested to try to find that out. I would expect that Veolia had probably thought of that. I just don't know how to quantify something that's so macro. The externalities of that are huge. I agree. But I don't have a slide.
And then perhaps my thoughts on the Chaupaya. In Germany we have a big river, the Rhine, which is full of factories with petrochemical industries. They were so dirty that I think there was like 30 years ago, they were not swimming there. And then the minister, I forgot who it was, he made a bet, he said, it will be clean. So everybody was saying, okay, you take a swim now. And this poor person had to swim in that bad water. But the point is that the German government said this is the law, zero discharge, and within 10 years the water was substantially cleaner. So that minister, who then became the ex-minister, but he could go back swimming without any hazard to his health. And 20 years later, the water is so clean that some rare types of fishes, which were thought lost species 100 years ago, came back living there. So I think for you, the message is actually we can reverse this whole bad thing to be in a very nice and clean environment if we just put our thought together. I don't like the thing to say that it's cost. It's not a cost if you can't breathe. If you can't breathe, then we're dead. So therefore you might, if you want to pitch this as a sale to your companies, you might change that. It's not a cost factor. It's a I don't know. It's a living factor. I don't know how to call this better than living factor.
Yeah, actually, with the true cost of water, I have many more presentations, and some of them are more or less focusing on communities, and I'll upload those. I'd like to upload all of those and share those with you, but within this small time frame. I think it's difficult.
Yeah, Michael, thanks for a very interesting presentation. Can you just clarify, because I think it then relates to the previous question, what you mean by reduced allocation?
Yeah, that I think what that means is you have a cost with reduced allocation.
I assumed it meant a reduced allocation for environmental flow, that by taking water out of the river, there's then less water that's then available for environmental ecological services, which then I think relates to what the previous question was.
Yeah,
when I've seen these kind of presentations before, it's sometimes put like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't touch on that. When the Veolia had sent me this package, they also sent it to me with a French person speaking. I actually couldn't understand. But yeah, that could very well be reduced allocations, allocating less resources.
Yeah.
Water.
Okay, and then the actual rate that's paid for water, you get charged by the water authority or whatever. Where does that come in?
That comes in here.
That's within the fresh water.
Yeah.
Okay, so then that shows this huge multiplier that you have, that you're paying that tiny little component
for water. Yeah.
Actually, for the water, you then paying up to $7 for the direct costs.
Yeah.
And then all of the other additionals is okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
What industry is that, by the way? You're not going to name the company, but...
Well, I think this presentation is coming from mining. I mean, more or less, a lot of references are from mining.
Okay.
I could redo it for seafood for Thailand, but just didn't have the time.
Yeah, I think as far as that goes, it'd actually be really interesting to see that for consumptive water use in Thailand, I'd assume that the largest industry would be the agricultural sector.
Yeah.
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 Which is then quite different again. And then one other question. Does zero discharge for along the Chao Phraya, does that really make much sense through the dry season when you've got the issue of the saline wedge coming back up the river and then potentially actually meaning that the water supply that we get is then potentially can become undrinkable if the wedge actually comes all the way up to the intake point?
I don't know
so
what you mean by wedge.
There's the Chao Phraya is an estuary, so that if the flow of water downstream becomes too low, then saline water actually starts to creep in.
Okay. So
and and so then they have to make a release from one of the upstream reservoirs. So I'm not 100% sure that then having a zero discharge policy for industrial facilities really makes a lot of sense, because if they're then drawing water out,
but not putting
it back in again, then okay, you've got a reduced pollution load, but you've also got reduced water. So I think that's got to be very carefully thought through.
Yeah, but I think looking at the volumes of water, you see that in actuality municipal water is much bigger than industrial water. But industrial water is much dirtier.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's sad to say that Thailand is really turned, historically turned a blind eye to meeting water regulations. A little bit of money here, a little bit of money there. I mean, textiles alone, and you've seen communities up in arms, so on, about these textiles and also the seafood.
Can I answer that question? Okay, it's very simple. If you force companies to have zero discharge, they have to think about their process or the raw material. So that means they will have new technologies, which means they will use less water.
They should, yeah.
Yeah. And therefore they will recycle the water. They will have an in-house cleaning plant. And that's the beauty of it.
If you have zero discharge, then your water consumption should.
Yeah.
External water consumption should.
I give you a good example. If you have to build a house in Germany, you have to be EA. It means that you actually have zero discharge from your house. It is actually, you're drinking your pure water, sorry, it's lunchtime. But that's the point. We can clean the water to the point that it's completely drinkable. And that's actually the way to go. If you are somewhere in Australia, you have a drought there for several years, they only have this 2 liters of drinking water, and then you really clean and clean and clean and clean it. So actually, you're not doing anything more than one time. You bring in this 2 liters per person. So yes, it would be good if we would have the zero discharge for the child per year.
Thank you very much. So I think Michael has some time for individual questions after, but I'd just like to thank him very much for giving us such an interesting talk. A lot of food for thought, everything from you know, the true cost of water to aquaculture to the shrimp industry, which a lot of us here are actually very passionate about promoting for more awareness in the shrimp and fishing industry. And what else? You know, recycling and all these case studies from the European countries. And so I think there's a lot to be done, and I think we're very happy that you're here and you're promoting these great cutting-edge technologies. So we look forward to seeing the shrimp factory that you mentioned and things like that. And I'd just like to give you a little token of appreciation for giving us such a wonderful talk today. And happy Michael. Big round of applause for good Michael.